The day of my graduation should have been one of the proudest in my life. Years of late nights, endless exams, and sacrifices had finally brought me here. I had imagined my parents cheering in the front row, their eyes full of pride, maybe even a few tears. But reality has a way of shattering those illusions. When I woke up that morning, I felt a strange emptiness in the pit of my stomach. My brother, who had always been quietly supportive, tried to reassure me. "Don't worry, Ethan. They'll show up," he said. I wanted to believe him, really. I wanted to trust that the people who had given me life would also acknowledge my achievements. Hours later, I found out the truth. My parents weren't coming. Not because of work, not because of travel, not because of any genuine obligation, but because there was a Super Bowl party that evening. A football game. A distraction more important than their son's years of effort. I stared at the invitation my mother had left on the kitchen counter. It was casual, almost mocking. "Don't forget, Ethan. It's just a game. Hope you enjoy your graduation." No signature, no hint of apology. Just a reminder that my accomplishments weren't enough to disrupt their entertainment. For a moment, I felt numb. I had rehearsed this day in my mind 1,000 times, imagining the pride, the hugs, the laughter, but this cold, silent rejection replaced every hopeful scene. I tried calling them, but the line went straight to voicemail. My brother watched silently, his jaw tight. He didn't say anything at first, because words would have been useless. He understood the magnitude of the betrayal, and in that quiet understanding, I realized something I hadn't fully grasped before. For my parents, I was never their priority. Their priorities were always comfort, appearances, and their own amusement. I spent the morning alone, getting ready for the ceremony. My gown felt heavier than it should have. The tassel hanging from my mortarboard seemed symbolic, a reminder of the weight I had carried for years with little acknowledgement. Finally, I left for the university. As I walked across the campus, I noticed other families laughing, taking pictures, and celebrating. The contrast was brutal. Every smile, every clap, every proud parent only made the emptiness inside me more intense. Then, as I settled into my seat for the ceremony, I noticed something unusual at the registration table. A stack of envelopes labeled one-way ticket. At first, I thought it was some kind of travel giveaway, but the university staff handed me one directly, with a smile that hinted at something more. I opened it, and my heart skipped a beat. It was a ticket of flight to a city I had only dreamed of visiting. The envelope contained a note. "Sometimes the world shows you the paths your parents won't." There was no signature, no hint of who had sent it. Suddenly, my feelings shifted. The disappointment from my parents' absence was still there. Yes, but a spark of possibility ignited within me. For the first time, I realized that life could offer opportunities I had never expected. And sometimes, the people who should support you are not the ones who will. The ceremony began, and I walked across the stage, diploma in hand. I could feel the absence of applause from my parents like a physical weight, but I refused to let it break me. Each step, each handshake, each photograph taken on that stage became a statement not of their love, but of my resilience. After the ceremony, my brother came up to me. "Ethan, whatever happens, we move forward," he said, eyes shining. That was all I needed. The one person who had never abandoned me, who had quietly fought by my side through years of neglect, was there. And in that moment, I understood the truth about family. It's not defined by blood or obligations, but by loyalty, care, and the willingness to stand by you when it counts most. That evening, while my parents were at their Super Bowl party, I sat on a bench outside the university, ticket in hand. It wasn't just a plane ticket, it was a symbol, a one-way ticket not just to a new city, but to a new life. A life where I was no longer defined by neglect, where my achievements didn't need validation from the people who failed to notice them. And as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I made a silent promise to myself. No matter where this ticket took me, no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would never let anyone else decide my worth again. My parents had made their choice, but I was about to make mine. For the first time, I felt a sense of freedom I had never known. A freedom born not from approval, but from the courage to step into a life I had always deserved. And that one-way ticket, small and unassuming in my hands, held the power to change everything. The ticket felt heavy in my hand, not because of the paper, but because of the weight of possibility it carried. My parents had chosen a football game over my graduation, but fate had handed me another path, one that wasn't dictated by neglect, indifference, or their priorities. I packed quickly that night. Just a suitcase, my diploma, a few essentials, and my brother's quiet blessing. "Go," he said. "Don't look back. Not for them, not for anyone who never showed up." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. For the first time in years, I wasn't leaving behind failure. I was leaving behind people who didn't deserve my presence. The airport was alive with noise and chaos, but I felt calm. The boarding gate loomed ahead, a threshold to the unknown. Every step toward the plane was a defiance against a lifetime of feeling invisible. My parents' absence didn't haunt me, it fueled me. Every neglected birthday, every accomplishment ignored, every small dismissal, they all became momentum propelling me forward. When I settled into my seat, the reality sank in. I was heading somewhere completely new, a city I had only dreamed of visiting, a chance to start over, to define success on my own terms. The one-way ticket was more than a journey, it was a rebirth. The plane took off, and I stared out the window at the shrinking city below. The lights of my old life flickered in the distance, a reminder of what I had endured. But the horizon ahead was endless. Endless possibilities, endless freedom, endless chance to create the life my parents had refused to support. Landing in the new city, I felt both exhilarated and terrified. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have a plan. But I had courage, the kind born from years of surviving neglect and betrayal. My first days were difficult. I worked odd jobs just to cover rent and food, navigating unfamiliar streets, and facing the harsh reality that freedom came with responsibility. But with each challenge, I felt alive in a way I had never felt at home. Every day was mine to shape, mine to conquer. I found a small apartment, decorated it minimally, yet it became a sanctuary, a place where no one's judgment, no one's expectations could reach me. Then came the first breakthrough. A local bookstore was hiring, and I applied on a whim. My resume was modest, but my determination shone through during the interview. I spoke honestly about my skills, my discipline, my drive, and my ability to persevere under pressure. The manager saw it. I got the job. Working at the bookstore wasn't glamorous. I shelved books, helped customers, and stayed late cleaning. But for the first time, I was in control. Every dollar earned, every task completed, felt like a personal victory. I realized that this life, this independence, was worth more than anything my parents could have given me. Evenings were spent exploring the city, meeting new people, and slowly building a community that didn't know my past. I was Ethan Miller, not the invisible son, not the ignored graduate, not the shadow of neglect. I was my own person. One night, as I walked home after a long shift, I found a small cafe tucked away in a quiet street. I stepped inside and was greeted by warmth, the aroma of coffee, and friendly faces. It was the first place where I felt accepted without explanation, without needing validation. I knew then that the one-way ticket hadn't just taken me to a city, it had brought me to a life where I mattered. And yet, amidst the excitement and newfound independence, a small part of me reflected on the journey I had left behind. My parents had made their choices. I couldn't change them, but I could choose how to live. The one-way ticket wasn't just an escape, it was a statement. A promise to myself that I would no longer rely on anyone else for recognition, love, or opportunity. By the end of the week, I had a routine, a sense of purpose, and a spark of confidence I had never experienced at home. Every challenge I overcame reinforced a truth I had known but hadn't fully embraced. Freedom is earned through courage, not given through convenience. And as I sat on the small balcony of my new apartment, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky, I whispered to myself, this is only the beginning. They may have ignored my graduation, but they will never control the rest of my life. Weeks passed, and my life in the new city began to settle into a rhythm. I had my job at the bookstore, a small apartment I had grown to love, and a network of new friends who knew nothing of my past. Each day, I woke up feeling lighter, freer, and more alive than I ever had at home. But freedom has a way of sending ripples backward. I started noticing messages and calls from distant relatives, acquaintances from my hometown, and even former classmates. Everyone seemed surprised at how well I was doing, how independent I had become. And with each word of admiration, I felt a quiet sense of vindication, not for myself, but against the parents who had never shown up for me. It wasn't long before news traveled back home. My parents, hearing about my achievements and my new independence, tried to maintain their prideful image in front of their social circles, but whispers circulated about the son they had ignored about Ethan Miller, the graduate they had abandoned for a football game. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I saw the first real sign of their discomfort. Photos from a family gathering appeared online. My parents smiled, but their eyes betrayed unease. Comments subtly mentioned my name, my successes, and my decision to move away. People were curious, impressed even, by the young man who had forged a life without them. I felt no gloating satisfaction. I didn't need it. The life I had built was its own reward. But it was undeniable the people who had refused to support me were being exposed to a truth they could not ignore. Then came the real turning point. A call from my mother. "Ethan, we want to talk," she said, her voice tentative, almost pleading. I paused. My fingers hovered over the phone. For years I had imagined moments like this, but never with such restraint. I knew what she expected, a meek apology, maybe gratitude for even acknowledging them. But I had learned to live by my own rules. "I'm listening," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. There was a long silence. Then, carefully chosen words. We heard about your life, about your job, your apartment, about everything. We want to make amends." I let her words linger. "Make amends?" I asked softly. "You mean after ignoring one of the most important days of my life?" "I know we failed you," she admitted. "But we want to try—" "No," I interrupted, calm but firm. "This isn't about trying. This is about understanding. And understanding comes from actions, not words." The line went quiet. For the first time, I sensed the gravity of my parents' absence in a way that words could not mask. Their neglect had created a man who could thrive independently, and they could do nothing to undo it. That night, after hanging up, I walked to my balcony and looked at the city lights. Each light was a reminder of opportunity, of freedom, of life unshackled by neglect. The one-way ticket had brought me here, but my choices had brought me further. In the days that followed, I focused even more on my life. I started volunteering at a local community center, helping young adults who faced challenges similar to mine. I shared my story sparingly, emphasizing resilience over blame. Every grateful smile, every word of thanks reminded me that my strength was not a product of parental support. It was born from perseverance and the loyalty of those who truly cared. Meanwhile, my parents tried to regain control in subtle ways, posting online, making calls, attempting to showcase themselves as supportive figures, but their efforts only highlighted the contrast between their neglect and my growth. I didn't need to confront them aggressively. The quiet reality of my success, my independence, and my happiness spoke louder than any argument could. Then came a moment of reflection. Sitting on the park bench one evening, watching families celebrate milestones, I realized something profound. The life I had feared I would never have was not defined by their presence. It was defined by my ability to rise, to embrace opportunity, and to honor those who truly mattered: my brother, my friends, and my own self-worth. By the end of the month, my parents had learned an undeniable lesson. The child they ignored could not be controlled, could not be humiliated, and could not be diminished. And while I didn't celebrate their discomfort, I felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that justice, subtle and unassuming, had found its place. I was no longer the boy who waited for approval. I was Ethan Miller, a man who had walked away from neglect, who had built a life of independence, and who had discovered the true meaning of family. Months had passed since my graduation and the flight that changed my life. Each day in the new city felt like a step further away from the life my parents had tried to define for me, and closer to the life I wanted to create. But even in my quiet success, I could sense the ripple effects reaching back home. Word of my independence, my job at the bookstore, and my growing presence in the community had traveled back to my parents' social circles. People began asking questions, noticing the stark contrast between the son they ignored and the life he had built alone. Each mention, each comment, each subtle acknowledgement of my achievements served as a quiet reminder to them. Neglect has consequences. One evening, while browsing social media, I saw the first signs of real discomfort. My parents had posted pictures of themselves hosting events, trying to maintain their image, but the captions, the hashtags, and even the smiles seemed forced. Their friends and family quietly commented on my accomplishments, comparing the attention I received to the absence of their support. I didn't feel glee. I didn't need to. The quiet justice of their realization was far more satisfying than any loud confrontation could have been. I had learned that the strongest statements are often the ones left unspoken. Meanwhile, my life continued to flourish. I took on more responsibilities at the bookstore, started mentoring young adults at the community center, and even enrolled in evening classes to further my education. Every accomplishment, no matter how small, reinforced my independence and reminded me that my worth was never tied to my parents' approval. Then came an unexpected letter. It was formal, polite, and yet tinged with desperation. My parents wanted to discuss matters in person. They wanted to see how I was living, how I had managed without their guidance. I considered it carefully. For years, I had imagined such a moment. I had pictured the apology, the recognition, even the remorse. But reality was different. I didn't owe them a meeting. I didn't need their validation. What I did need was clarity. So, I invited them to my small apartment, but under my terms. No dramatics, no excuses. Just a simple conversation. When they arrived, their expressions were guarded. My father's jaw was tight. My mother's eyes wary. They looked at me differently, no longer as a child to be controlled, but as a man they had failed to nurture. "I see you've done well," my father said cautiously. "Yes," I replied, calm and composed. "I've built a life without your help, and I've realized something important. The people who matter are the ones who show up when it counts." My mother tried to interrupt, offering apologies, explanations, even gifts. I listened quietly. Then I spoke. "Apologies are words. Actions define reality, and your actions have already shown me who you are and who you aren't." Silence filled the room. For the first time, I realized that the quiet power I had accumulated, the independence, the respect from my community, the loyalty of my brother was far more potent than any confrontation. My parents had no leverage. They had nothing to offer that could change the course of my life. In the weeks that followed, my parents attempted minor interventions, calls, social media posts, invitations, but each effort only highlighted their previous neglect. Friends and family, already aware of my success and resilience, quietly shifted their allegiance. The contrast between their superficial concern and my real achievements became undeniable. I didn't gloat. I didn't issue threats. I simply lived. Every day I thrived. Every project I undertook, every student I mentored, was a testament to the life I had reclaimed. The one-way ticket had been the catalyst, but the life I built was entirely my own. And in that quiet space, I found satisfaction not in revenge, not in shaming them, but in the knowledge that I had transcended the neglect that once defined me. I was no longer constrained by the limitations of their indifference. I had power in its purest form, autonomy, self-respect, and the unwavering support of those who truly cared. The world outside my small apartment window continued to move, but I was no longer a passive observer. I was a participant, a man who had been underestimated, ignored, and abandoned, now standing firmly in his own life, stronger than anyone had ever imagined. In the end, the lesson was clear. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is simply to live well, to rise quietly, to grow steadily, and to let the consequences of neglect speak louder than any words ever could. By now, the dust had settled. My parents had tried to assert themselves, subtly and publicly, but the world had already seen the truth. I wasn't the child they ignored. I was a man who had built everything on his own terms. My accomplishments, my independence, and the life I led were proof that neglect could not define me. I spent mornings at the bookstore, afternoons mentoring young adults, and evenings walking the city streets that had once seemed foreign but now felt like home. Each day brought new challenges, yet every challenge reminded me of the strength I had cultivated in silence. My brother remained a quiet pillar of support, loyal, steadfast, and proud without needing to show it to anyone else. One afternoon, while organizing a community literacy event, I received a text message from my parents. It was brief. "We'd like to reconnect." I stared at the screen. For years, I had imagined what I would say if this moment ever came. Anger, sarcasm, tears, they all flashed through my mind. But instead of reacting impulsively, I paused and reflected. What they wanted was validation. What they thought they deserved was forgiveness. But what I had earned was freedom. I replied simply, "I'm living my life. That's all you need to know." It was not cruelty. It was clarity. It was the power of a life built without their interference. That evening, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker against the horizon. I thought about the one-way ticket that had changed everything, about the moment I left my old life behind, and about the countless small decisions that had led me here. Every step had been a choice, some easy, some terrifying, but all had been mine. And in that quiet reflection, I realized the ultimate truth. Life cannot be controlled by those who do not value you. Power does not come from money, influence, or blood. It comes from the courage to rise, to act, and to live authentically. I thought of my parents, of the Super Bowl they had chosen over my graduation, and of all the opportunities they had squandered to stand by me. There was no anger anymore, only understanding. They had shown me their limits, and knowing those limits freed me from expecting anything from them ever again. Instead, my focus was on the people who truly mattered. My brother, whose loyalty had saved me in more ways than one. My friends, who offered kindness without judgment. And most importantly, myself, the man who had survived neglect, embraced opportunity, and refused to let past betrayals dictate his future. Weeks later, I received a letter from a young adult at the community center, thanking me for the guidance and support I had given. They had felt abandoned, ignored, and unseen, much like I once had. And in their words, I saw the reflection of my journey. Pain transformed into purpose, neglect transformed into empathy, and absence transformed into action. For the first time, I understood that true family is not always defined by blood or obligation. It is defined by presence, loyalty, and love that manifests when it truly matters. My parents had failed to teach me this, but my brother, my friends, and life itself had shown me the way. Standing on my balcony that night, the city alive beneath me, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The life I had built was mine, unshackled from expectation, free from neglect, and rich in meaning. I was Ethan Miller, clean-shaven, resilient, and finally whole. No apology. No regret, no confrontation was needed. My parents' choices had set the stage. My courage, my independence, and my brother's unwavering support had written the ending. And the ending was perfect, because at last, I was living a life they could never take from me, a life fully my own.